She was not a myth. She was real, and she could kill you before the snow melted on your boots. Archaeology now confirms what saga and rumor only hinted at 4 centuries. Some Viking women didn't just survive their world. They mastered it. A bloodied axe hits frozen ground. A silhouette stands above it, breathing slow and steady. Her body isn't posed, it's prepared. This isn't a reenactment, it's a reintroduction. Today, strength is a choice. In the Viking world, it was a condition of existence. One woman scrolls past gym routines and motivational slogans. The other grips a shield with hands calloused from rope and reins. For her, there's no curated feed, no rest day. Just the daily calculus of life and death, etched into every scar she carries. This is not a commentary on modern strength. It's a reminder. Empowerment then had no language, only outcomes. Shieldmaidens were not fantasy figures conjured in mead halls. They stood beside brothers in battle, but they also governed farms while their clans raided. They stitched wounds by torchlight. They mourned children. They managed winter stores, negotiated blood feuds, and returned to battle when called. Their strength wasn't compartmentalized. It was total, and it was expected. This documentary doesn't ask whether they existed. We begin with the assumption that they did, because now the evidence demands it. Runes carved into swords, skeletons buried with shields, sagas passed through generations. This is not a fantasy. This is their forgotten truth. Snow stretches silent and untouched beneath a winter sky. The fjord glows pale blue at sunrise. Astrid stands barefoot on the frozen ground. Her breath a slow pulse of vapor in the cold air. Inked runes streak her forearms, drawn in dark ochre. They are not decorative. Each one marks a name, a prayer, a promise. Her feet do not flinch. Her skin steams where fire and ice meet. A wolf howls far off. She does not turn. Instead, she draws her sword. Astrid, her name is found not in saga alone, but in soil. At Birka in Sweden, a 10th century grave was uncovered. A warrior buried with weapons, horses, and honor. For years it was assumed mal until bone analysis confirmed the truth. The warrior was a woman, and not alone. Other graves like it have surfaced across the Norse world. Astrid is drawn from these records, not a fabrication, a composite of the evidence. Sword by her side, history beneath her feet. She sharpens her blade slowly. The rasp of steel on stone is steady, practiced. With each motion she chants, not loudly, but with precision. These aren't words of bravado. They're ritual, a rhythm passed through generations. The sword is sharp, but the silence is sharper. This is not training. This is remembering. Her lips move, forming syllables whose meanings are half lost to time. But their shape still matters. They settle the mind. They signal readiness. Behind her, the ground rises into a low burial mound. A cairn of stones, dusted in snow. Her sister lies there, also a fighter, also remembered in carved bone and ash. The burial was fresh in the season before frost took the river. Today's preparation is not for battle. It is for grief. The raven circling overhead does not call out. It simply watches. The wind carries a low tone across the fjord, like breath, like warning. The camera does not cut away. It stays with her as she turns toward the rising sun. This isn't folklore, it's memory with a body. The runes on her arms, the scars across her fingers, the grave behind her. She stood on snow, barefoot and unshaken. Not a myth, a memory. A woman leads the room. Her blazer is sharp, her voice controlled, her face composed. Around her, laptops glow and clocks tick. She's presenting numbers she memorized at midnight, sipping coffee that's gone cold. Her eyes flick to the corner of the screen. Another alert, another meeting, another reminder she's supposed to be grateful. The calendar says she's in control. Her body says otherwise. Behind the high-functioning surface, exhaustion. On the screen, a split begins. 2 lives, 2 settings, both under pressure. Astrid moves across a frozen field, eyes locked on tracks in the snow. Her shoulders steady beneath wool and hide. She breathes deep, calm, alert. Meanwhile, in an open office floor plan, the modern woman toggles between messages. Slack pings stack like snowfall. Her thumbs move faster than her thoughts. One hunted elk, the other hunts in box 0. Astrid drags the carcass across the snow. Her blade works with precision. No hesitation. This is survival, learned and repeated. She doesn't pause to celebrate. There's no time. In the boardroom, the modern woman clicks through her final report. She's done everything right. She ends the call, rubs her face, and exhales. Her inbox is quiet now. She's not relieved, just emptied. Today we talk about strong women. They lived it, with no one to applaud. In the Viking Age, 85% of property transfer cases allowed women to inherit leadership roles. If a husband died, a wife didn't beg to be taken seriously. She took the reins. Farm records, legal disputes, food reserves, all within her authority. Sagas and law codes from Iceland and Norway confirm it. A widow was expected to lead. She didn't ask for power. She assumed it. Now, the boardroom woman sits in an HR meeting where her promotion is deferred again. This time, for team balance. We carry titles like shields, boss, warrior, survivor, mother, each one a badge, earned and defended. For women like Astrid, identity wasn't layered or labeled. It was lived whole. One moment she's hammering iron into nails, the next she's nursing a child, then training with her blade. No applause, no post, no compartmentalization. Her strength wasn't curated, it was constant. This isn't about nostalgia, it's about perspective. The Shieldmaidens didn't have easier lives. They had integrated ones. They weren't stronger, they were less fragmented. The modern woman stands alone in the elevator, face lit by the glow of her phone. Astrid stands alone on a ridge, snow and wind in her hair. Neither one is weak, but only one knows stillness. They weren't hashed, they were history. Shieldmaidens didn't operate at the edge of society. They lived on it. They didn't pick a path between home and battlefield. They walked both, every day. 1 hour they wielded an axe. The next, they buried a child. They led, they fought, they bled, they endured. Not because of myth, but because of necessity. Their lives weren't dramatized by time. They were shaped by it. There was no luxury of specialization. They didn't choose roles, they carried them all. Fighter, mother, mourner, commander. In the Viking burial ground at Birka, Sweden, archaeologists unearthed a grave filled with prestige. A sword, axe, to war horses, a full set of gaming pieces, the markers of a tactical leader. For over a century, it was assumed to belong to a man, but in 2017, DNA testing confirmed otherwise. Grave B, J581, held the bones of a woman. Her burial mirrored that of Viking chieftains, not token warriors. This wasn't symbolism, it was status, earned in life, honored in death. Their training wasn't symbolic either. Shieldmaidens weren't exceptions. There were participants. From youth, some girls learned to carry the same weapons as their brothers. To block, to strike, to withstand. They trained because they had to survive, not just to fight. Bruisers came before battle. endurance came before legend. Archaeological finds across Scandinavia, swords in female graves, trauma patterns in bones, confirmed this was lived reality, not romantic invention. For too long, myth has distorted the picture. Saga literature is full of exaggeration. But that doesn't mean shieldmaidens were fantasy. Quite the opposite. Many were embedded in systems of law and inheritance. Some were landholders. Some appeared in court records. Others led their own households, while commanding armed defense. The truth is clearer and stronger than the legend. They were real, and they were many. This story isn't about reclaiming a myth. It's about recovering a memory. It is about understanding that the most extreme Viking lives weren't always lived by kings, but by women balancing swords and sorrows in equal measure. What remains of their lives tells us not just how they fought, but how they endured. We're not chasing a fantasy. We're recovering a legacy. They found the grave in Birka, Sweden, nearly a millennium undisturbed. Inside, weapons, arrows, to war horses, and a full set of tactical gaming pieces. For decades, the assumption was unchallenged. This was the burial of a high-ranking male warrior. The goods signaled authority, battlefield strategy, and elite status. But in 2017, DNA testing of the skeletal remains revealed the warrior was female. Not a mistake, not a novelty, a commander buried with full rights, no indication of ridicule or reduction, just honor. What was once overlooked now stood as evidence. Not myth, but memory. Among the grave goods were more than weapons. The presence of gaming pieces suggested intellect, planning, battlefield foresight. This wasn't just a fighter, this was someone expected to lead. In male warrior graves of similar rank, such items are associated with generals, those responsible for strategy and logistics. The sword and shield may have earned respect, but the game pieces earned command. Her bones carried signs of strain, consistent with mounted combat and heavy blade use. Nothing ornamental, all functional. The sagas had told us. We just hadn't believed them. Characters like Leg and Herva populate Norse literature. Women who led armies, claimed vengeance, held command. For generations, historians dismissed them as literary devices, symbolic inversions. But the archaeology says otherwise. These stories weren't exaggerations. They were reflections. Snorri Sturluson, writing of Lagertha, called her courage unmatched by any man. The graves, the wear on the bones, the weapons at rest each piece, confirms the literature. These women existed. Training didn't begin in adulthood. It started early within the household. Viking combat emphasized formation over brute force. Shield walls demanded timing, coordination, and rhythm. Women who joined these lines needed to match the unit, not simply survive, but contribute. Accounts from Saga and battlefield alike described synchronized flanks, rotating shields, quick counters. Combat was a learned grammar, and shieldmaidens spoke it fluently. They weren't spontaneous exceptions. They were trained peers. Their weapons weren't ornamental. Spears for range, seekses for close defense, axes for dual use. Tool and weapon, muscle memory formed over time from chopping wood, lifting buckets, wrestling with siblings. The boundary between daily life and combat training was porous. What honed survival at home translated into skill in battle. A girl who knew how to grip a hatchet could, with little adaptation, wield a war axe. Fighting, in Norse society, was deeply psychological. Animal metaphors trained the mind. Bear's rage, snakes, speed, raven's eye. These weren't just poetic flourishes, they were strategic frameworks. The bear struck with overwhelming force. The snake pivoted and struck with precision. The raven saw what others missed. These archetypes guided fighters mentally as well as physically. Astrid, for instance, might have entered battle mimicking a serpent, fluid, sudden, calculating, training-focused not just on the body, but on cultivating a mindset. None of this challenged religion. Quite the opposite. Odin, the god of war, poetry, and death, blessed both male and female warriors. In the poetic Ida, Valkyries chose the slain, but they didn't exist only in myth. Many appear as semi-mortal figures, women who guided fate through battle. Astrid's offering before combat, placing a carved icon of Odin into the earth, was not superstition, it was alignment. She wasn't seeking permission, she was confirming purpose. Valkyries were not invented to explain war, they were drawn from it. Their descriptions, armor-clad, weapon-wielding, decisive, closely mirror accounts of real women in combat. Rather than projecting fantasy onto history, Norse mythology appears to have absorbed real figures into archetype. The gods remembered what the sagas recorded and what archaeology now affirms. These were not imagined warriors. They were elevated memory, half myth, half ancestor. Modern narratives often paint these women as rebellious, out-of-place heroines, but that's a misread. Shieldmaidens weren't defying gender. They were fulfilling duty. In a society where family, honor, survival, and spiritual obligation were intertwined, taking up arms was a legitimate and at times expected. Saga accounts describe village elders blessing women before battle, not chastising them. The presence of a woman in war was not transgression, it was participation. Grave BJ 581 is not alone. Across Scandinavia, dozens of female skeletons have been unearthed with weapons, some buried with horses, others with axes, arrows, and armor. Combined with legal codes, saga texts, and oral tradition, a consistent pattern emerges. These women were not rare anomalies. They were part of the landscape. Not the majority, but not myths either. A social reality now surfacing through soil, bone, and ink. This is the foundation for what comes next. We aren't following a story. We're following a pattern, one written in ash, blade, and ritual. The evidence isn't loud. It doesn't boast, but it builds. Layer by layer, grave by grave, saga by saga. Not fantasy, foundation. And from that foundation a fuller truth takes shape. The cold comes first, before breath, before movement. Dawn slips silently across the fjord, catching on ice crystals and the rough wool of Astrid's cloak. Her boots crunch through snow that hasn't melted in days. Goats bleat softly in the pen, vapor rising from their nostrils like smoke from unseen fires. She breaks ice from the trough with the blunt edge of her axe. Survival is rhythmic. The animals eat before she does. The frost clings longer than she notices. Before eating, she trains. A wooden sword arcs through morning air, striking an old stump. Each hit is measured, timed. Not brute, she counts her breaths, not reps. The wind doesn't watch her, but it whistles with approval. This is how strength is maintained in a body and a world where softness invites death. Sweat beads at her brow, evaporating before it cools. Alone, she sharpens her mind, one strike at a time. A girl watches her from the edge of the yard, no older than 10. Astrid says nothing. She hands the girl a small axe. No ceremony, just grip, stance, wait. The child imitates her with quiet intensity. Mistakes are corrected without scolding. This is the inheritance of survival past, not in words, but motion. The girl adjusts her stance, and Astrid nods once. Strength wasn't taught. It was transferred. By mid-morning, she kneels in a clearing, sword tip grounded in snow. Her breath fogs as she raises her hands. No temple, just pine trees and sky. She whispers to Skadigadas of winter, vengeance, the hunt. Her blade rests between her palms, not as a weapon, but as an offering. Snow drifts down like ash. No words are repeated. The ritual lives in the gesture, not the language. Her prayer is simple. Keep me sharp. Later, she finds the tracks. Elk, broad-hoofed, moving east. Her breath slows. Bow drawn, arrow loosed. The animal stumbles, then falls. She approaches with care, touching the blood-warmed fur. She kneels again not for guilt, but for gratitude. The blade slices clean. Her hands are red by the time she finishes. Life given, life taken. Respect isn't in softness, it's in precision. She doesn't notice her own wound until the tore a tear across her forearm from thorns or bone. She doesn't flinch. She binds it with linen, pulled tight and tied. No ritual here, just practice. Pain is part of the agreement she never signed, but always honors. Back at the longhouse, she visits the Volva older, sharp-eyed, cloaked in sage smoke. Astrid speaks of last night's dream. Snow turning to fire, her mother's voice calling from beneath ice. The Volva listens without reaction. Then she stirs ash into a spiral and pours it. You fear death, she says, but more, you fear not being remembered. Astrid says nothing. The fire speaks louder than either of them. Outside, she gathers sage, yarrow, wormwood, not just for poultices, for rituals, for scent, for grounding. She moves through the underbrush like a shadow, choosing each stem with intention. The herbs will dry above the hearth, reminding her of the seasons that still pass, even when nothing else seems to. Her home is small, hide and wood, fire and stone. A hound eats from a carved bowl. She mends a torn sleeve using a needle made from bone. Everything is done in silence, but not in solitude. The room holds the echoes of those she's loved. Her sister, her mother. Even silence here has a shape. She lays out her shield. Raven sigils, one wing cracked where an enemy blade struck last spring. She dips her brush into ash and ochre, redrawing the lines. It's not Artit's intention. The raven sees. The raven remembers. This is not vanity. It is alignment. Her blades are next. One hers, the other once her sister's. She sharpens both with even strokes, each breath matched to steel on stone. Not just to prepare but to remember. The edge must be ready, but so must the mind. The raid isn't until spring, but the preparation is now. She oils her boots, checks her rope, ensures the runes carved into her pendant are still visible. A comb, too delicate for war, rests beside her gear. It once belonged to her mother. She lifts the comb. Carved bone, smoothed with age, a swirl of old gentleness in a life of sharpened edges. She holds it quietly, not using it, just feeling the reminder that softness wasn't always a threat. Some parts of the past you don't repair, you carry. She dreams of Valhalla, feast halls and golden shields, but more often she dreams of dying on the wrong field alone, unseen. Before she sleeps, she places her sword beside her bed, not from fear, from familiarity. She sleeps like she lives with iron nearby, and ghosts in her dreams. There are days when she doesn't train alone. In the forest clearing, she meets Sigrid, her cousin, and sometimes rival. They circle each other with practice blades. No armor, only instinct. The clash of wood on wood echoes between the trees. Each blow is calculated. There is no anger here, only trust. a shared understanding. Pain now prevents death later. Afterward, they sit, breathless. No praise, no critique, just mutual calibration. Before winter deepens, the council gathers 5 elders and 3 younger women, Astrid among them. They count stored grain, debate routes for spring raids, discuss who will lead and who will stay behind. No one raises their voice. Authority isn't shouted, it is recognized. Astrid speaks only once about the condition of the eastern paths. Her words are brief, but accepted. Influence here is quiet but real. Sometimes memory arrives without permission. She passes a cairn on the ridgestones stacked above her sister's bones. Months have passed, but she still feels the weight of the final prayer, the smell of smoke, the silence that followed. She kneels beside the mound, places a piece of polished amber at the base, not for magic, for remembrance. The dead don't need flowers. They need witness. Later, by firelight, she oils her weapons. The handle of her seeks is wrapped in cured leather, the temps fused into antler. She knows every crack in the blade, not because she studies it, but because her life has depended on it. She rubs the edge with fat rendered from last season's hunt. The blade will not rust, neither will she. And when night falls hard and the wind pushes at the slats in her wall, she dreams again. This time of a fjordacy, endless. Her ship cuts through the water, but the oars make no sound. She is alone until she sees others on the shore, faces she cannot name, but they know her. When she wakes, there is no fear, just a hum beneath her ribs, a reminder. Her story is still being written, even in sleep. She turns, places her hand on the hilt beside her bed. Her breath evens out. The fire dims. Snow shifts on the roof above. Another day complete. Nothing wasted, nothing certain, and still she dreams. Strength was never just measured in muscle. It lived in the ability to stay quiet through hunger, in how long you could kneel beside a grave without breaking. Shieldmaidens didn't just train to strike, they trained to wait, to watch, to endure. When winter froze, the fjords and days passed with no sun, they survived by holding their minds still. Astrid stands in the snow, unmoving, her eyes water from wind, but her jaw doesn't tremble. This is not performance. This is practice. For pain, for patience, for what comes next. When sleep brought dreams, they paid attention. Not because they were mystics, but because dreams worked like maps. Night visions were not written off as fantasy. They were decoded like battlefield reports. Astrid wakes from one now, heart pounding. She kneels by the hearth, takes charcoal from the edge of the fire, and sketches symbols into the ash. Later, she will bring them to the Volva. The seer, these dreams have weight. In the sagas, dreams warned of betrayals, revealed lost kin, or signaled death. In this world, a dream could change your decisions more than a command ever could. But not all fears came in dreams. Some arrived by morning. In the form of a body to bury, Astrid lays a linen shroud over her lover's chest. Her hands do not shake. She ties a knot at the ankles, then one at the wrists. She cuts her braid and places it beneath the body's head. This grief is private, but not hidden. There are no tears. Not because she doesn't feel them, but because she can't afford to. By dusk, she will lead others into a raid. Grief is not something they outran. It was something they wore, like a scar, like armor. To die on the battlefield wasn't an end. It was the peak, the promise. If your hand still held a weapon at the moment of death, you might be seen by the Valkyries and carried to Valhalla. The hall of the slain was not just for men. Women who died with blades drawn were promised the same fate. Norse mythology was not a closed gate. It was a mirror. A woman with a sword was not less sacred. She was equally chosen. Fire blazes high over the funeral pyre, and a sword rests across the chest. She is not mourned as a widow. She is honored as a warrior. The bond between shieldmaiden and weapon was not casual. Swords and axes weren't equipment. They were identity. Astrid's blade carries runes down its hilt. She traces them with her thumb before every battle. Some shieldmaidens named their weapons. Others passed them down through bloodlines. The steel wasn't a tool. It was continuity. When Astrid lost her sister, she kept her seeks, not to preserve her memory, but to keep that edge in the fight. Even in silence, the blade spoke. Not all battles were fought on foreign shores. When men died in raids, it was often women who kept the land and the order intact. Astrid sits now on a carved stool, 2 villagers at her feet disputing a border fence. Her axe rests across her knees. She doesn't shout, she listens, decides. Her authority is not questioned. Norse law codes, like the Groggers, acknowledged women as household heads, inheritors, and when needed, they led with iron. This wasn't only local truth. It was visible to outsiders. Foreign chroniclers, from the Islamic traveller Ibn Fadlan to the German Bishop Adam of Bremen, recorded Viking women as striking figures. One trader wrote of women with steel eyes and calloused hands, who spoke with the same weight as their male counterparts to those outside the north. Viking women were already mythic, not because they were imagined, but because they defied foreign expectation. They were not deferential. They were deliberate. Strength didn't exclude softness, but softness was earned. Astrid kneels by a child with a cut hand. She tears linen, presses it clean, and wraps it tight. Her face is different here. Not warmer, just less guarded. Kindness was not a constant. It was a choice, and that made it more powerful. Viking women weren't void of tenderness. They were simply precise with where they placed it, when to show it, and who could see it. Power, to them, was not something you demanded. It was something you carried daily, without applause. Astrid doesn't seek control. She maintains it through competence, through ritual, through survival. The way she sharpens her blade is not flashy. It is habitual. The way she gathers herbs isn't spiritual performance. It's strategy. No slogan, no speech, just practice. Power was not granted. It was observed. Tonight, she stands by the fjord, alone, sword planted in the earth. She is not performing. No one is watching, but her ancestors would know. She doesn't pose for strength. She sustains it. Her silhouette holds steady as the wind cuts across the water. She does not clamor for recognition. She embodies continuity. They didn't brand their identities. They lived them. When Astrid fights, she doesn't declare herself a warrior. She proves it in her movements. When she grieves, she doesn't narrate the pain. She folds it into function. Their psychology was not romantic. It was forged. Forged by ice, blood, hunger, and ritual. They believed in fate, but they trained anyway. They honored death, but they feared dishonor more. Their minds were not coddled. They were carved. And still, the culture allowed room for meaning. Dreams mattered. Memories mattered. Weapons bore names. Elders were consulted. Strength wasn't pure aggression. It was channeling. Just as a river finds its bed, the shieldmaiden learned to hold power without spilling it, to move without collapsing, to speak without wasting breath. When a shieldmaiden died, she wasn't just buried with her gear. She was buried with her story. Astrid's grave, when it comes, will hold her Sikhs, her raven-marked shield, her mother's carved comb. Each object speaks of survival, of sacrifice, of identity maintained across winters and wars. This wasn't fantasy, it was reality. Sharpened by snow, sealed by time. The strength of the Shieldmaiden wasn't imagined. It was practiced, daily, privately, consistently. And what we remember now is not mythology. It's memory, still breathing beneath the frost. Food wasn't comfort. It was calculation. For Shieldmaidens, survival began in the gut. High-fat diets, sealed blubber, fish oil, dried meats, fermented milk, powered long hunts and cold raids. These weren't casual meals. They were metabolic armor. Astrid chews a strip of dried herring, packing more into a hide pouch sealed with birch pitch. The fuel she stores today could mean endurance on the ice field tomorrow. In modern terms, her body shifts into ketosis, converting fat into energy that outlasts sugar and grain. In her world, there's no time to crash, only time to move, to keep warm, and to keep watch. When the body breaks, healing doesn't wait. Astrid kneels by firelight, mixing pine tar with dried yarrow and mugwort. Her thigh is sliced open. Not deep, but deep enough. She grinds the herbs with a river stone, spreads the dark paste, and binds it with wool soaked in elder sap. These aren't home remedies, they're battlefield essentials. Yarrow to stop bleeding, mugwort to reduce swelling, pine tar to draw out infection, every compound passed down by women who treated wounds before surgeons had names. The fight never ended with the blade, it continued in recovery. Protection wasn't only physical, it was spiritual, layered into the skin itself. Astrid rolls up her sleeve to reveal dark blue runes inked into her forearm. Faint now, but still visible under firelight. These marks are not decorative, they are talismanic. The rune Alges for protection, Tiwas for warrior clarity, each line carved with intent, pressed into flesh with charcoal and bone needle. It's not about belief, it's about readiness. To wear protection on the body is to remind the mind. You are not alone, not unarmed, even in sleep. Heavy iron slowed you down. Shieldmaidens didn't wear the chainmail of kings. Their armor moved with them. Tunics lined with ringed iron at the shoulders, leather boiled until hard, layered at ribs and arms, a strip across the collarbone. Reinforcements where strikes tended to land. Astrid tightens the straps across her forearms, squats, rotates, no pinch, no drag. The point wasn't invincibility, it was mobility. They didn't stand still in battle, they flowed. Like modern body armor, the aim wasn't to stop every blow. It was to keep going after the first. Every item carried into the field had purpose. And then a second one. The axe split firewood. It also split skulls. The Sikhs sliced roots and throats. The cloak was warmth and camouflage. Astrid reaches for her long knife, tests its edge, then runs it through the belly of a gutted hare. Same motion she would use if attacked. Utility-bred reflex. There was no separation between survival and violence. They trained not just for moments of combat, but for daily repetition of readiness. Sleep required recalibration. The nervous system couldn't shift from fight to rest without ritual. Astrid's boots are animal hide lined with rabbit fur, soft but insulating. She rubs salve into her feet, the scent of juniper and bear fat rising. The fire is small and steady. Her fingers trace the lip of her drinking horn in rhythm. These are not indulgences, they are tools. Warmth against the soles of the feet activates vagal tone. This isn't theory, It's practice, passed down by repetition and observed in the slow return of breath. Before lying down, she checks her sword, not for fear, for discipline. The blade rests beside her bed, hilt facing inward. A small figure of Skadi, the huntress goddess, stands near the fire. Astrid mutters a short phrase under her breath, not quite a prayer, not quite a chant. The fire flickers low, her eyes blink slower. Every part of this process sends the same message to her brain. The fight is over, for now. Her body learned peace, through pattern, not permission. But patterns don't erase everything. The sagas don't call it trauma, but they show it. Women waking from battle, eyes grey and distant, dreams of blood, of cries from beneath the ice. Astrid jolts upright in the night. Her breath is sharp, her chest damped with sweat. She reaches for her sword on instinct, then exhales, realizing there's no enemy in the room. Only the echo. In the Havar saga, Shieldmaidens describe dreams that won't fade. In the Valsunga saga, women hear voices that were buried. These aren't poetic devices. They're narrative fingerprints of what today we'd name PTSD. What steadied them wasn't solitude. It was connection. Sisterhood, whether by blood or battle, was the tether back to sanity. Astrid once fought beside her sister. Now she fights with the memory. They used to laugh in the snow, mimic bird calls, braid each other's hair in silence. After battle, they would clean their blades, side by side. Not speaking, just being. When her sister died, Astrid kept her comb. Not for grief, but for grounding. In war, there were few constants. That bond, that anchor, was one of them. And so survival became more than what you ate, more than what you carried. It became a system, rooted in chemistry, reinforced by culture. Rituals were not superstition. They were cognitive scaffolding. Tattoos were not art. They were armor. Weapons were not symbols. They were solutions. Everything in Astrid's world pointed toward one purpose: to endure without losing herself. This is the part of their lives often forgotten. Not the battles, not the blood, but the mechanisms beneath the surface. Biochemical, psychological, practical, evidence carved into grave goods, tattooed into skin, preserved in texts that recorded the ache beneath the armor. They didn't call it nervous system regulation, but they practiced it. They didn't label it resilience. They lived it. And they didn't separate body from mind, from spirit, because survival didn't give them the luxury of disconnection. It required unity. In every breath, every blade, every firelit night. Shieldmaidens didn't survive because they avoided pain. They survived because they ritualized it. Their strength wasn't loud. It wasn't for display. It was practiced in the quiet, communal, necessary rhythms of war, home, and healing. Astrid buries her comrade beneath stone, places a hand over the mound, and stands again, sword in hand before the sun has risen. In her world, pain wasn't an interruption. It was part of the cycle. They didn't find meaning after pain. They built it inside it. They didn't do it alone. No warrior stood without her circle. The fire, the hand on the shoulder, the voice in the dark saying, "You are not alone." Siblings, clans, companions formed an emotional armor, more powerful than around the hearth. They shared not just warmth, but memory. They recited lineage, retold dreams, tended to wounds of flesh and spirit. Strength wasn't something you declared. It was something reflected in the faces around you. In modern times, we're often told to face life alone. They were taught the opposite. Survival depends on the village. Every ritual had a purpose. Painting runes before battle wasn't about belief. It was about rhythm. Chanting before leaving home wasn't superstition. It was regulation. Astrid murmurs a line to Skadi as she straps on her boots, breath steadying. She's not suppressing fear, she's shaping it. Richa gave form to what otherwise would be chaos. Over wounds, they whispered songs. After loss, they lit the same flame in the same order. Ritual made fear bearable. Pattern made pain sacred. Grief was not hidden. When they lost someone, they didn't collapse in shame. They grieved visibly, loudly, with keening voices and raw hands. Astrid stands at a stone grave, her palm pressed flat, her voice cracking into wind. It's release. They didn't confuse silence for strength. They knew grief wasn't a crack in the armor. It was the armor, the hardened place where love had lived. Their ability to mourn made them strong, and kept them human. Maybe you've never lifted a sword, but maybe your soul has. Maybe you've held vigil by a hospital bed. Maybe you've stayed upright while something inside you broke. Maybe you've walked into rooms where you weren't safe, but stood anyway. That's the core truth. This isn't just about them. It's about us. Strength isn't forged in iron alone. It lives in endurance, in presence, in the choices made when no one is watching. Today, strong woman is often reduced to a posture, a look, a filter, a curated feed, but Shieldmaidens knew better. Strength was what you could carry, what you could protect, what you could outlast. Astrid doesn't show her strength. She enacts it daily, without applause. She binds her wound. She lifts her shield. She helps another woman tighten her armor strap. No audience, no post, just living through what needed to be done. Empowerment wasn't a performance. It was persistence. To feel fully, to live vividly, to protect and endure. That was rebellion. And still is. Strength isn't looking unshaken. It's choosing to live anyway. Astrid walks through snow with blood on her boots and a baby strapped to her back. A modern woman holds her child with the same set jaw, the same hollow under her eyes. The contexts have changed. The core has not. Living fully, not numbly, not passively, is an act of power, especially now. Their knowledge wasn't lost, just buried, beneath slogans, beneath busyness, beneath silence. But it's still there, in the body, in the breath, in the way your hand knows when to reach for another. Astrid's silhouette stands in a field of snow. It begins to shift, until it becomes a modern woman, walking down a city street, snow falling, head up. The line between you and her isn't broken, just buried. And now, maybe, it's time to remember. The fire burns low. Astrid lies on her side, her breath even. One hand rests on the hilt beneath her pillow. Not intention, but out of habit. The blade is part of her ritual. Not a signal of danger, but of order. Across her face, flickering shadows rise and fall with the coals. This is not rest taken. It's rest allowed by the body, by the silence, by the completion of another day. Outside, the wind hums against the wood, but inside, all is still. She dreams. In the dream, snow crunches under her bare feet. In the distance, fire crackles. Not with menace, but warmth. And somewhere beyond the flame, a voice calls her name. Clear, familiar, female. The voice doesn't startle her. It summons her. In the dream, she doesn't flinch. She walks forward. A frozen fjord reflects the fire. A woman's outline appears, beckoning. Astrid's shoulders lower. She is not being chased. She is being welcomed. Her eyes stay closed, but her lips shift. The faintest smile. It's not joy, exactly. It's recognition. Her body does not stiffen. It relaxes. She's not unaware of danger. She's fluent in it. But now, There is no resistance left in her. The work is done. The call has come. Her breath slows. The fire dims. Her fingers release the hilt. She lived like a storm, and rested like a flame. The camera lingers. Her shield hangs on the wall, scratched, worn, intact. A carved comb sits on a wooden table. Her sisters beside it, a drinking horn, a bundle of herbs, a bone needle, nothing perfect. Everything earned. These are not relics, they're records. The room doesn't try to impress, it holds what matters. A raven calls once in the distance, then silence. This is not a legend, not a symbol. It is the quiet truth of a life that held more than war. It held duty, memory, devotion. Shield maidens were real, and their strength was not in fantasy, but in fire, loss, silence, and blood.